In the previous video, we explored the transformative phase in Frank Lloyd Wright's life as he ventured to Europe, fueled by both professional ambitions and a complicated love affair with Mama Chaney. Now, join us as we dive into the next chapter of Wright's journey. Returning to America, he faces a changed landscape and personal challenges. Discover how these experiences continue to shape one of the most influential architects of the 20th century. Subscribe now and stay tuned for more insights into the life and legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright. Using a Welsh word, which means shining brown, in front of the resplendent, but also has to do, in English, with a hill crest, right? So, a hill crest, which was a shining front, it was a Welsh bard who spoke there, created a complex in which he wanted to do something similar to what Jefferson did, the neoclassical president we've already talked about, the third president of the United States and a key figure in the Declaration of Independence. He built in Monticello what was, well, a rural utopia of the owner who rejected the urban and sought the roots of the good life on the farm. In this case, a solemn and significant farm, but in any case, within that ruralist will that is present in this country of farmers and frontier settlers. So, the same idea that Jefferson had with Monticello, Frank Lloyd Wright had with Taliesin in the mountains of this Wisconsin valley. On a hillside, he built a complex of buildings that would be, from then on, his residence, his studio, his reference, his place on earth. Certainly, this is a later drawing of that kind of ensemble of pieces that he created there to live with Mama Chaney and to start his career from a different foundation. The estate, as you can see, was enormous, as depicted in a later plan. And this is how it looks in a more contemporary photo because, as I mentioned, it has undergone many modifications for reasons that I will now explain. Don't be misled by these contemporary images where everything is, let's say, too manipulated and perfect because these are the ones now shown to Taliesin visitors. What matters to me about Taliesin is that he, let's say, colonized it with this, stela that is placed at the entrance of the complex. It is important to highlight that some of the most creative projects of his career were carried out there. However, both have disappeared. One of them was this one, the Midway Gardens, which he started right after returning from Germany. Certainly, in Germany, he had seen these Midway Gardens, these beer gardens, where people could drink and eat outdoors. In Chicago, he created these beer gardens. These fantastic Midway Gardens where his affinity for Japanese influences began to manifest. In a multitude of decorative details, they were a huge public success. Unfortunately, Prohibition put an end to them. So, when the dry era arrived, they were demolished because their original purpose had disappeared. Sometimes buildings die due to inevitable circumstances. Yet, there's always his intention to introduce that total work of art, in the coherence between the whole and the details. The other major project to which he dedicated almost a decade of his life was this hotel, the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, a colossal and immense hotel. At first glance, the floor plan might lead one to think that Wright had betrayed his ideas because it's a truly classical plan, symmetrical, with two wings. What had happened? However, at the same time, the geometric control of the ensemble makes us think that Wright was there, and indeed, he is present. Indeed, in the decorative language, it reaches extremes of quaintness and sophistication that are truly marvelous. As you can see, for example, these drawings made by him were later materialized in every corner of the Imperial Hotel. This led him to reside in Japan for an extended period while working on it. As a small anecdote, it was completed very late in 1923, and right after its completion, a major earthquake struck. The building survived the earthquake, which brought tremendous popularity to Wright, not just for creating a remarkable building, but for it withstanding a devastating earthquake. However, Real estate forces found it occupied too much land, and with the high cost of land in Tokyo, it was demolished due to real estate speculation. It disappeared, similar to how the Larkin building vanished for other reasons. In 1913, Franklin Wright, already a mature man, had designed another building that never came to fruition in San Francisco. Life, however, had another tragedy in store for him the following year. In 1914, a mentally disturbed African-American servant killed Mama Chaney, her 2 children, and 4 others, a total of 7 people, and set fire to the Taliesin complex. It would take a long time for him to recover from this impact. He had created Taliesin as a place to start life anew, and it was beginning with these 2 significant commissions, the Midway Gardens and the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. Suddenly, everything came crashing down. It was very difficult for him, and those were incredibly challenging years. After Mama Chaney's death, he fell into the hands, if you will, of another extraordinary yet dangerous woman, Miriam Noel, a failed sculptor, morphine addict, and almost half-mad. She wrote him a letter of condolence when the news of his supposed death was published in all the newspapers. He wanted to meet her and fell into her trap. Over the next 10 years, it was a genuine nightmare for Wright because his relationship with her was complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, he dealt with it and reconstructed his career in many ways. For instance, he tried to go back to selling houses, almost with small ads in newspapers, not like the Chicago Tribune one. You can own an American home. He attempted to rebuild his path as a residential architect and befriended Alice Vansdahl, a Californian heiress who was also a complicated and capricious woman, asking for impossible things. As he had to travel to Japan frequently, passing through California on his way, he built a residence for Alice Vansdahl in Los Angeles. This house, eccentric and extraordinary, was inspired somewhat by Maya architecture. It's called the Vansdahl House, or, as it's commonly known, the Hollyhock House. Hollyhock House because it features a decorative motif throughout. Here, you see this geometrized flower motif, which is a hollyhock, what we would call the Malvarosa. For many years, he simply traveled to Japan, spending from 1917 to 1922, 5 whole years living alone in Japan. During this time, he worked as a dealer of Japanese prints, completed the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, and built the extraordinary Hollyhock House for Alice Vans. Fortunately, it's in Los Angeles and can be visited. It has become a tourist attraction in the city, a beautiful but strangely monumental, heavy, and complicated work. The theater, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of the entire complex, as Alice was a theater enthusiast, was never built. The house now appears as an extravagance of an even more capricious owner. Many things seem inexplicable. However, an extraordinarily integrated house in the landscape, as would be the case for all the ones Wright creates from then on in the Californian nature. I say this because in 1923, between 1921 and 1923, Wright definitively returns from Japan, settles in California, and creates 4 remarkable works, 4 small houses. It's as if the master had suddenly regained his direction after being lost for 10 years, and very quickly, within a span of 2 years, he produces 4 houses. All made with what he calls the textile block, a concrete block with molds that imitated decorative patterns, allowing them to act as points of interior lighting. And with this element of the textile block, he creates these 4 houses. This one, the first one, he called the Millar, a miniature marvel in nature. Look at Wright's drawings and then how it materialized. In the actual house. The storehouse of the same kind. Also with different interiors. Where the textile block granted it all this, an extraordinary sensuality and sculptural richness. The Freeman House, which you can also see here in the drawings, both the exterior and the interiors. And finally, the Ellis House. 4 marvelous houses that showed the master hadn't lost his touch. That he still had, let's say, the ability to captivate. That he could still create great things. Suddenly, at this moment, he had another burst of creativity. However, a catastrophe struck in 1923. His mother died, which was a terrible tragedy for him. He took advantage of this to marry Miriam Noel because, while his mother was alive, he hadn't dared to separate from his wife and 6 children who continued to live in Oak Park, even though he didn't visit them. He married Miriam Noel, only to divorce her 6 months later. It was a crazy situation. They had been living together for almost 10 years. He married and separated a year later because he realized that it had no future. In 1925, another devastating fire struck Taliesin, leading to his economic ruin. He was heavily in debt and he found himself in another lost decade. In this episode, we witnessed Frank Lloyd Wright's resurgence with the creation of 4 remarkable houses, demonstrating his enduring creative prowess. However, personal tragedies and economic setbacks continued to shadow his path. Join me in the next episode as we explore how Wright navigates through these challenges and reshapes the course of his architectural journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comments below. Stay tuned for more insights into the life and work of the iconic architect.